Alrighty, everyone, hello. And you know what? I gotta say, I've been watching quite a bit of, I guess, atheist content lately. Like, I don't know, I've just been suddenly found myself very enamored with, like, the more atheist side of YouTube, with, like, the online podcast, and with, like, Genetically Modified Skeptic, especially. And there's a lot of stuff that I find myself, honestly, deeply agreeing with whenever they speak. And those things, namely, are the fact that, yeah, I don't know if this really needs to be said, but there is no objective evidence that Christianity is true or that God is real. And one thing especially that really stuck out to me was when one person, was saying, like, okay, to a Christian caller onto the online podcast, okay, well, what is your objective proof of anything that's mentioned in the Bible? And she's like, well, the Bible says. And he's like, no, the Bible is the claim. Where is the evidence? And you know what? There is none. Like, what we have as evidence is just people talking about it. And that's just hearsay. That's just first-hand accounts. It's okay to believe it, sure. But we gotta be real and say that, like, we don't have, like, a fossil we can, hold up and definitively say. We don't have physical evidence anywhere of, the bread and the fish miracle or anything else. To me, as a person of faith, though, the thing is, we don't need proof, because that's the point of faith in the first place. The point of faith in the first place is that you have absolutely no reason to believe it, and you believe it anyway. But you have to acknowledge that that's what you're doing. So, like, for me, to be able to acknowledge that is honestly pretty freeing. Because there was a time in my life where I thought I must just be a very dumb person to believe in anything religious when it's, clear that there is no evidence. Why would I believe in something with no evidence? But that's why I was talking about faith in the first place. That's what faith is. Faith doesn't necessarily need any kind of evidence, it just is. And the thing about that is that as a fantasy writer, as someone who really loves the idea that there is more out there, faith is all I need, because I don't need empirical evidence. I don't need it to be proven true. I just need to want it to be true, for it to be true and impact my life. The philosophy of Jesus is something I definitely get behind, whether I one day went full atheist or not. There are Christian atheists who do exactly that, who believe in the philosophy and the morals and the teachings of Jesus without necessarily believing that God's real or that Jesus was ever even really a real person in the first place. It's possible. And I just think that if Christians were a little bit more honest with themselves about the fact that that's what they're doing, that they're wanting something to be true rather than actually having any concrete proof of it, then their faith would get a lot more genuine. Their faith would get a lot more honest. I've had people ask me, right, like, when I start poking holes in all of the things that they believe, that they say they have evidence for, that they really don't, I've had people say, well, what makes you a Christian then if you don't believe that Deuteronomy was literally written by Moses, if you don't believe that the story of Exodus literally happened, or that Genesis literally happened, if you don't believe that, like, I don't know, any of this stuff really happened, well, what about you as Christian? And it's actually really funny, because it was in this book, Christians as the Romans Saw Them by Robert Louis Wilkin, that I learned that actually the idea that you have to believe that your religion is literally true is not like a universal thing. So, for instance, in that book it talks about Julian the Apostate, who was an emperor of Rome, who was born Christian, actually. This was a time when, like, post-Constantine, when the imperial family was already Christian. Julian was born Christian, but then he ended up reverting back to Roman polytheism and being a massive, really zealous proponent of Greek and Roman polytheism. And so he himself, the emperor, this Julian, he said, why do these Christians and these Jewish folk, why are they out here saying that these things literally happened? Why are they saying all these myths really happened? We know that our myths about our gods are just myths, that they're metaphors, that they're not literal. So why don't they know that about their God? That was 2,000 years ago that this was being said, that this question was being asked, and I find myself asking the same thing. Why do we need these stories to be literal when so many other religions were perfectly content to understand that their religion was myth, metaphor, stories to explain the world in a more spiritual way? I don't need Exodus to have literally happened to understand that, like, it's still a really interesting story with still a lot of really interesting implications. and a lot of really interesting lore, stories, morals, laws, all these other things. Like, it's still a cool story. Prince of Egypt was a fucking baller movie. Like, are you kidding me? But I don't need it to be literally true to believe it to be true in a spiritual sense, right? There are things that, even if they did not literally happen, still hold truth. Truth being things like, hey, you know, we should not do to other people what had just been done to us, right? One of the big refrains of Exodus, as you were slaves in Egypt, so you will not, you know, do this and do that and the other thing. You will not treat the sojourner badly, you'll not do all this other stuff, right? And it's still insight into the character of God, how people understood him, what they said that he said, you know, all these other kinds of things. And so I find myself also kind of like, because my boyfriend is agnostic, sometimes we will sit down together and we'll look at things, and like there'll be videos like 10 questions Christians say atheists can't answer or something. And like, I as a Christian look at these questions and I cannot physically fathom how people can genuinely ask these questions with a straight face and think that they did something. For example, there's one that's really popular going around, well, if, you know, religion is man-made, then why does it go against all of man's desires? That's a popular one.
People be like, Christianity is man-made. Okay, well then why does everything about it go against man's desires?
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore
I am. I am. Hey, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you.
And the thing about it is that religion does not go against all of man's desires. It surely does not. It gives us containers in which we can appropriately express those desires. For instance, right, you know, intimate relations with people, stuff like that, those get special defined boxes so that society can overall still be in some way organized. There has to be some contract, there has to be some this and that and the other thing. But even then, that's not like a universal construct, right? Like, there have been plenty of places and peoples that don't do that, but still, religion gives us these defined boxes in which we can have money, in which we can have romantic and intimate partners, in which we can have all these things. We still have these things in religion. We still do these things. We still have alcohol, and we still have music in many religions, like Christianity. We still have, most notably, a promise that when we die, we're not permanently dead. Even though I'm a very ardent theist, oftentimes I do find myself thinking like an atheist and responding to things like an atheist, which when you are into witchcraft and spirituality is very important, because that can be the difference between, you know, you double checking yourself and deciding to back up and go for a walk when things get really heavy, and diving headfirst into spiritual psychosis. Because when you're able to step back and be skeptical and say, I don't believe that's really a thing that happened, I think there's a logical explanation for this, and you're able to jump to those logical explanations first, you will not end up like all the fundies now running around trying to tell us that dinosaur bones were planted by the fucking devil. There is such value in acknowledging that religion, for the most part, is unprovable, untestable, and really not something that we need to be proving and testing, because at the end of the day, it's a personal system. It's a personal alignment. It's something that you engage in because it makes you feel fulfilled and makes you feel like you have a structure to organize yourself on, morally, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and all these other things. It's something that gives you basically a preset guideline on how to live, much like you can start up a video game like Dark Souls and get a preset amount of stats assigned to start a playstyle with. If you want to have no religion and go full like barbarian mode, all your stats starting at 1 and you got nothing but a loincloth and a club, by all means go for it. That's a very good way to play if you know what you're doing. But if you're just starting out, sometimes it helps to have a preset warrior build, mage build, or something else. And that's what these religions are. They're preset builds for morality, for spirituality, for understanding and relating to your fellow human beings. And that's okay. It does not weaken anyone's magic to say this, nor does it weaken anyone's faith to say this. I still believe God's very real. I just acknowledge that there's never going to be any proof, probably, that he's real. If I'm proven wrong about that, and we one day do get proof that God is irrefutably real, that'll be insane, but I'm not holding my breath for that. And even then, you can very much be a witch and be an atheist anyway. We've already did a whole video about that too. So I love God, and I love the idea of God. I love the idea that God exists, and that's why I decide to believe it, even though I know that it's not like concrete and provable. Why? Because it's fun. Because it makes me happy, because I've experienced God, at least in my own beliefs, in my own meditations and everything else. I truly believe I've experienced something of the divine, and that's enough for me. I don't need to make anyone else believe that God exists. I don't need to make anyone else believe that he doesn't. I don't need anyone to believe anything the way that I believe it, because at the end of the day, what I believe affects no one else but myself. My actions from what I believe, the things I do as a result of my beliefs, those impact other people, and that's why you gotta really make sure that your beliefs aren't things that hurt people, because that would be bad. But for the most part, how I decide to engage with the world and the concept of divinity and spirituality really doesn't have any bearing, and should not have any bearing, on other people. If people want to worship God, cool. If they want to worship flying spaghetti monster, great. Whatever they want to do, that doesn't really matter. If it makes you understand people a bit more, love people a little bit more, if it makes you play nice in society a little bit more, by all means, you go, brother. Great. That's all that needs to be said about it. And I just really wish that more Christians would come to that understanding. That no, the Bible is not proof of shit. That no, there is no proof that God exists. And that even if you believe you've experienced him directly, that's okay. Believe it. But don't ask anyone else to believe what they themselves have not experienced then. Don't ask other people to believe what they cannot see, quantify, experience, or anything else. Just be happy and feel blessed that you have experienced it. Feel happy with the relationship you have with the divine and with divinity as a concept, and just keep trying to express that divinity into the world. There was a quote when I was reading to get my confirmation in the Episcopal Church. There was one person who said this, and I forget who, but she said, our mission is not to go preach against what other people believe. That's useless. Our mission is to show people a light so wonderful, so pure, so great, so warm, that people have no other choice but to ask what the source of that light is, that they're so drawn to it that they must know. That is the point of being spiritual, is to exude the fruits of your philosophy and your spirituality, to show off in truth what your philosophy and your spirituality and your beliefs have done for you, right? Not in terms of material things, but in terms of like how they help you understand and cope with and experience and walk through this world. So there's that. Enjoy with these thoughts today, and I will see you guys next time for some more fun reacts if I don't get this book fully read through. So, see ya.